Hello. Get a lot of questions on this question. It's in the second semester of AP Computer Science, and it seems to have like a lot of students stumped. So I want to go over it a little bit. It says you have written a class. Now the key here it says is a class called tree. So it's not main, right? It's not one of the main ones that you run. So it's this class that you've created. It's called tree. Now I know the tendency is to think like, well, if you created a class and you call it tree, that means you must have an object called tree. But notice in here it doesn't say that we have an object anywhere in here. So you can kind of get that out of your mind here. Okay, so let me get my pen again. In a second program, you have the line, it says here tree.getTemperature. Now remember that we are just we're evoking this class called tree here. We haven't created a tree object, and we know that because you would have to, in here you couldn't call it tree, right? You'd have to call it like tree 1, tree 2, or spruce, or something like that, spruce, birch. It'd have to be the name of the tree. But here we're just saying tree.getTemperature. We haven't created an object, and that's something that they don't just out and out say in this question. You just have to know that, well, it says tree.getTemperature, so they haven't created the object. So down below it asks well, which one of these things is true. So you immediately start looking down there, and you know it's like, well, if it says get temperature, it must return something. So you look down here, it says must return a value. Okay, so this looks like that could be it. So I might mark this thing. It says get temperature must be declared private. I think we know enough that probably isn't true, because usually the variables are private, the integers and whatnot. It says get temperature must be void. Well, I don't think it has to be void, but it could be, I suppose. Get temperature must be declared static. Now I'll give this one away here. Okay, so it's not this last one either. So you can narrow it down to must return a value, or otherwise why would you even have get temperature, right? It has to return something. Or it could be must be declared static. And this is the part that messes students up. It's like, does it have to be static, or does it have to return a value? Which one of those is true? And I'll admit the easiest one is like, well, it has to return a value. That sounds like that must be it, but not the case. And actually, I guess I haven't really messed around with this enough to see what happens if it doesn't return a value. But we can experiment with that. I don't know why you would call it if it didn't return a value, but let's mess around with this a little bit. Okay, first of all, I just have this main method up here, and and I just want to show you that we've been doing this all along. Here I just have my standard import statements up here, my main class right here. This has nothing to do with anything. Public static void, we have this word static right here, and we've just been doing it because that's what we've been told to do. Public static void main, right? String.str throws IO exception. We've just been doing this from day one, and we haven't really questioned why we have this static here. And then what I want to do is I want to call this up, and I just want it to return the value of 2. So the temperature is going to be 2, I guess. So system out println get temperature, and it's supposed to come down here and return the value, and here it'll print it out for us. So let's compile it. And it says right here, cannot be referenced from a static context. And it has basically something to do with, well, this is in a static context here, and so this one cannot be referenced from another static context, and it has to do with creating an object. Since we haven't created an object, this method has to be static. Now we used static in a couple different variations throughout the class, but because we haven't created an object, this one has to be static. So we just put in static static int get temperature and then return 2. So let's compile that now. Now it compiles, and if I run it, you see it spits out the number 2 right down there. And that's just because I referenced this from a static context that this has to be static also. So even though it's just down below this, this still has to be static. That's not what the question asks, though. Well, it's something similar to what the question asks, but the question asks or states that you have written a class called tree, and in a second program you have this line, tree.getTemperature. Well, there's kind of a cool little thing you can do with Java. I'm going to make a new thing here, and I'm going to call it well, here, hold on a second. I actually have it all typed out here for me. I will copy and paste it so I'm not doing this the long way. Let me save it. Let me compile it. Okay, so now I've got this other class here that I've created, public class tree, just like they said in the question. And now I have this public void tree right here. Let me straighten this up here a little bit. And by the way, in Dr. Java, if you get things kind of all cattywampus like this, where it's not all nice and neat, you can do a select all, control all, and then hit the tab key, and it straightens everything out for you, which is kind of a cool thing. So now I've got this public void tree, and notice that I have this other method down below here. These are two separate methods. They're not connected through these brackets. And all I have is public void tree, and then I have this public static int getTemperature, and I'm going to return the value of 1. Okay, so first of all, if I were to compile this, okay, well, wait a second here, and I were to say get temperature, even though I have this tree that says get temperature, then I'm going to return a 1. Let's see what happens when I run this. Okay, it still returns the value of 2. That's because get temperature is referencing this method down here. I would have to put in tree.getTemperature. That it knows to look over here to the tree and get temperature. So okay, so I'm sorry, somebody just came to my door. I'm actually coming back to this about 5 minutes later. I hope I'm starting where I left off before. So yeah, it looks like I tried to do this. Let me compile it and run it. Run. It returns a 2 because it comes down here, but I want this. I want it to return a 1. So it didn't do that, so I have to go up here. And actually, let me get rid of this word static here, first of all, and compile it. Notice everything compiles. And let me do a tree.getTemperature and compile it. Oh, okay, so now it's telling me you can't do that. It's giving me the same error as it did before because I'm trying to reach out to tree and I'm trying to get the temperature. And I can't do that because this is not static. So now when I do this, I'll go back here and compile it. Should compile. There it goes. Okay, so now I'm going to do tree.getTemperature, and when I run it, it returns the value of 1 now. So it doesn't even do this one. You notice that? It goes out to tree and returns this value. Now the important thing to understand here is that I never created a tree object. I just wanted to run this program from main. And in order to do that, I had to make it static. And that may seem odd to you, but we've been doing it all along. From ever since we've been creating these secondary methods that we use in our program, they've always been static. And we can call them from our static void main because they are a static instance being called from a static instance, and we're not creating an object. If we were to create a tree object, then we could have like a get temperature, but we would have to say like tree, new tree is equal to, you know, birch or something like that. And then over here you'd have to have the constructor under here, you know, birch equals, you know, the type of wood, hardwood or softwood or whatever it is, and then, you know, how many leaves, you know, deciduous or something like that. So you'd have to create your tree object, and then you could get temperature, but you would have to evoke the tree method first of all, or you'd have to evoke the tree object, and then you'd have to call up the tree object. So it'd be like spruce.getTemperature, birch.getTemperature, so that it knows which tree you're talking about. But if you just want to run a method from this method, then you have to make sure that it's static. And it's static because this one is static. It's being called from a static method, and you don't have a tree object. So basically, I hope that explains it. That's basically it in a nutshell. Just remember, we've been doing it from day one. It just we've never really made it that big of a deal. So if you get rid of that word static, you'd run into errors. So give it a try, mess around a little bit with it, try to make this program, make a main, and then also make a tree, and see if you can get it to work, and see if you can also get some errors to come out of this, and practice with it a little bit. It's important to know when it has to be static and when it doesn't have to be static. All right, take it easy, everyone.